Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Anderson. I'm the Assistant Dean at the University of St. Thomas, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our weekly online learning series. Today's session is Mindfulness, Skills to Navigating Work and Life's Challenges with Dr. Tammy Gifft. We've had a change in our advertised presenter due to a family situation, but I am delighted to have Dr. Gifft joining us today to take us on this journey. She's been a great friend to University of St. Thomas as well as the community. As we start approaching June, I want to give you a quick outlook to our next two online learning seminars coming up. On Wednesday, June 3rd, we are going to be welcoming Michelle Vig, who will be talking about decluttering your home office, your calendar, and your mind. Maria is actually the founder of Neat Little Nest and has been trained in the Marie Kondo method, but she takes a more holistic approach. Michelle has her first book coming out this September, so that will be next Wednesday. Then the following week, on Wednesday, June 10th, we have thought leader Doug Lennox talking about leadership intelligence, bringing together emotional intelligence and moral intelligence. Doug has been an executive coach for decades and has a very high-profile client list. His first client was actually Ken Chenault, the former CEO of American Express. That's going to prove to be a great session as well. Well, I hope participating in this weekly event has given you some great professional development. As you know, we have turned all of our courses into virtual experiences. And so if you're looking for more comprehensive professional development, check out our website. We'd love to see you in one of our summer courses. The difference between our summer courses and something like this webinar is we do cap attendance at 25 participants, just to keep that personal intimacy that St. Thomas is so known for. So take a look at our website. Our plan for today, in a moment, I'm going to introduce Tammy, and she'll spend about 40 or 45 minutes on the theme of mindfulness. Now, she does want to encourage your engagement throughout the presentation, so as questions come up, don't hesitate to use the chat feature, and you can direct them to all panelists, and I will make sure that we get those questions entered in. Also, as always, our goal is to end by 8:50 or 8:55 to give you a few minutes to prepare for your 9 o'clock meeting. And if you have any technical difficulties or you need to step away, please know the whole session is being recorded and will be made available to you next week. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tammy Gifft. Tammy is a licensed psychologist practicing as an executive coach and a leadership trainer here in the Twin Cities. She's also a frequent guest speaker in our MBA programs here at St. Thomas. In 1995, she started the Carpe Diem group, serving all types of different organizations in leadership training and mindfulness development. She's also an executive coach at the Center for Character-Based Leadership. Tammy has her MBA from the University of St. Thomas. She also has an MA in Counseling and Psychological Services and a doctorate in Business Administration. I am delighted and truly grateful to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Tammy Gifft.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm really excited to be with you today, even though I'm the pinch hitter, and because mindfulness is a really important part of how I work with my clients in their development, professionally and personally. I am a trained therapist also, and that's where I really bumped into mindfulness, is when I was discovering this. I became a therapist in my 40s, and I discovered this concept of mindfulness, and I instantly knew, that this was going to be a key for my own personal health and well-being, and undoubtedly for my clients too. So it's a really important topic to me. It's near and dear to my heart. And I look forward to spending the next 40 minutes with you, hopefully answering questions, and maybe even more, hopefully, is hoping that this provokes more questions and investigation on your part. So just sit back and enjoy, ask questions, be present. And again, know that there's a recording. So if you do have to step away and you want to come back when you can be more present, that's spot on, great. So please consider doing that. So again, we're talking about skills to navigating work and life's challenges. Mindfulness is a really broad topic, and I'll go into the definition shortly. But what I want you to be aware of is it doesn't have to be overly hard, but it's not overly simple either. The idea is to really show up and be present. And in some people call it our ADHD type environment right now, it's really difficult to stay present. And as I think, especially now that we have all this time on our hands, we kind of let the mind go where it wants to go. So as you all are aware, we see this term breaking news like all the time right now. In fact, I'm always surprised when I turn on the news at night and I don't see breaking news, because it seems like that's an overused term. And of course, the breaking news right now is mostly around this situation. You know, this pandemic here caught every single person I know, every organization I know by surprise. And I guess that's good, because we weren't, I'm gonna say it's good, you know, who wants to be in fear all the time of the upcoming pandemic? But this has actually caused a lot of things to surface. So this is our new normal here for now, and we don't know how things are going to return. So getting our head around some of the challenges of being in this pandemic, and then also just of life in general, is, you know, maybe a little bit of mind training would be a wise move. And to me, ultimately, that's what mindfulness is. It's about realizing I don't want to give the car keys to my thoughts and let it drive wherever it wants to go. Sometimes it's referred to as, we all have this thing called monkey mind, that our thoughts are these monkeys just jumping around in our head, and they kind of go wherever they want. And so when I introduce the idea of mindfulness, the idea is, well, what if we could maybe slow down that rapid pace that our thoughts have? And again, we're human, and our thoughts tend towards the negative. We have a negativity bias. It's what made us survive in the world. And that negativity bias kind of can instill us fight or flight. And the fight or flight is something that was really wonderful on, you know, the Serengeti, when we were trying to save ourselves from, you know, tigers chasing us. But some of us are living in this chronic fight or flight, or what's called a stress response. We're living in it like every moment to moment. And here's what we have to pay attention to. Notice on the left side of this slide here, when we are in this fight or flight, moment to moment experience, and again, not everyone is living in this moment to moment, but probably more people have this undercurrent of stress in their life that they're maybe even unaware of. But look at some of the things that happen on the left side. Blood pressure tends to go up. Stress hormones like cortisol tends to be, you know, emitted and put into our body. And by the way, that's related to, you know, increased weight around your core. And of course, that has all sorts of health implications. Sticky blood platelets. Then we go on the right side here, and we see that, you know, it impacts your GI system, your immune system. And by the way, people are talking to me now about the fact that their libido's gone. And so it's like, wow, there's a lot of things going on here. And rather than, you know, just saying, oh, that's just the way it has to be, what if we said, maybe there's something else we can do to approach this? I am a mental health therapist, and what I'm noticing a lot of things, actually. Some people who have had a history of some depression, anxiety, they're coming to me because they're familiar with what that feels like. They're saying, hey, it's knocking at my door again. What should I do? And we talk about strategies. For people who don't often have that type of experience, this can be really unsettling. I've heard people come to me saying, I don't know what this is. And then they go through their symptoms, and what they're describing might be even a small panic attack. Okay, so we kind of just try to take a breath and settle in and figure out resources. And mindfulness is one of those tools that is always available to you. So I hope, again, at the end of today, that you realize that it might be a tool worth shining, maybe getting in your toolbox first and foremost, and then maybe keeping kind of sharp, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, there's a whole list in the middle here too about other aspects of chronic fight or flight. And so one of my roles when I work with people is to realize there are options, and mindfulness is just one that I'm going to toss into your camp as one of the options to help you perhaps deal in a more effective way with fight or flight. So we're going to do a very brief settling in exercise. I always smile when I do this because I bring this into corporate America. I bring this into high-powered meetings when people are like, let's get this thing going. And I do so knowing that I'm doing a service to people. So that's what I'm going to give to you. I'm going to gift you a little settling in exercise. I have my lovely Tibetan bells, if you can see them, from when the Dalai Lama was in town in Minneapolis, I think about 5 years ago. He was in town, and I purchased these then. And so I invite you, number one, to maybe just surrender to my very brief guided settling in exercise. If that's uncomfortable for you, feel free to just sit and breathe and just kind of allow yourself to relax into this presentation. I'll start with one bell, I'll end with one bell, and I'm just going to walk you through, like I said, a little settling in. You're welcome, by the way, to close your eyes if that's comfortable. Otherwise, a soft gaze maybe at the side is what you need right now. I invite you just to soften, relax, and breathe. Realizing the breath is with you all the time, and it takes care of you gently, nurturing your body, taking out the toxins. It's always there. And maybe just allowing yourself to, again, maybe just relax into your chair, letting the chair do what it's supposed to do, which is to support you. And checking in with your body for a moment here. Maybe doing a brief body scan. How does your body feel in this very moment? And checking in with it. Noticing if there's anything that is wanting a little bit of attention. Tightness, pain, numbness, tingling. Or maybe you're even just noticing that you are relaxed, and what that feels like. So now allowing yourself to breathe in through the nose and exhale through the mouth a few times. Allowing the air to actually go in to your throat and down into your belly. And allowing maybe the belly to even expand a little bit more. Filling and then noticing the turn of the breath and the long exhalation. Releasing. Letting go of whatever you're holding on to. And just breathing for a few moments here. During our time together today, it will not be unusual for your mind to wander. And I invite you to come back, maybe even to this image of the pier, or just back to your breath. Realizing that in moment-to-moment awareness, you can direct your thoughts and your mind to where it should be, where you want it to be, rather than letting it wander. And again, that's the natural state of the mind, is to wander. And that's okay. But we want to be able to guide it so it's helpful to you and of service up to you. Well, thank you first and foremost for taking a few moments away from undoubtedly a busy, rich life that you have to do something like that. I use this at the beginning of meetings to have people become more present to the meeting. I worked at a local insurance company, and we started every single staff meeting with something like this, because we were going from conversations with like patients or members, I should say, who maybe were dealing with cancer and also maybe just found out they were pregnant. And so there's a lot of emotions that we were holding, if you would, for people. And we needed to come into a staff meeting and talk about standard operating procedures. Boring, maybe, but essential and necessary. And so we needed people to be present to this, but we wanted to honor that transition too and allow people to come in and be present. So again, if you think this is too out there, I tell you that there are major corporations who do this in meetings, who have meditation rooms, who have personal harbor rooms, so that they can allow people to break away from their busy day and come in and take a breath. Maybe do a stretching exercise so they can become more present and, by the way, more effective in the roles that they play. So for those of you who have been just dying to find out what this mindfulness definition is, I am going to take this from Jon Kabat-Zinn. Jon Kabat-Zinn is the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction. He's a PhD, I believe, from University of Massachusetts. And he's the one in the late 70s, early 80s, determined that maybe there is something here in merging Eastern and Western practices to help people in dealing with, at that point, mostly cardiac issues. So he was working within the hospital there. So he has evolved this program, and his working definition right now is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So the key here that I think most people get kind of caught in is this non-judgmental place. Because if there's nothing else that we humans are, we are really, really good at this judging. And you throw in a pandemic, there's a lot of stuff going on out there that really, it almost like we have permission to judge because we have rules like 6 feet and masks and this and that. And I really do invite you to realize this place of non-judgment is a place of liberation from some of those thoughts, catching yourself when you're in judgment. I am working on this all of the time right now. And I mean that as one human to another. I have to keep that in mind. I limit my media, by the way, because it seems to fuel my judgments in a way that's not healthy for me. So notice, if I'm aware of what's good for me and what's not so good for me, I can make choices moment to moment about how I'm going to deal with that. And that's what we invite you to do. So again, mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, present moment, and in this challenging, non-judgmental way. Jon Kabat-Zinn says, this is really, mindfulness is essentially about being awake in your life. People sometimes say, well, gosh, when I practice some mindfulness, I actually get tired. And they're like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I'm like, well, what it means is you're tired. So, we have these stories about what we should be getting from maybe a meditative moment. And sometimes that's slowing down. We just go, wow, I'm really exhausted right now. Maybe what I need is a nap. Fabulous. That was a mindful moment of checking in with yourself. Great. Let's keep doing that. Again, maybe drawing from my therapist background is people are longing for something. And sometimes they look outside of themselves to get it. Like, I'm going to read one more self-help book. I'm going to take one more class. I'm going to talk to all my friends about what they're doing. And I'm not saying that's not wise. I also think, though, sometimes we look outside of ourselves and maybe we should be looking within ourselves. In mindfulness, when you can actually show up and say, wait, I've noticed I've been checking in with everyone else. Have I checked in with myself? That might be the place to go to say, hey, I actually know what to do right now. I don't need one more bit of information to know I should have that difficult conversation with my teenager, or it's time to talk to mom and dad about their wills. You have wisdom in you. And mindfulness, I think, actually kind of clears the clutter and allows you to realize, wow, maybe that's what I can do is really honor myself. And by the way, people are having a lot of crisis of confidence. Self-doubt is on the rise right now because people don't have concrete answers. And so maybe a little bit of self-compassion would be a really helpful thing to incorporate. So again, Jon Kabat-Zinn says here, it's a powerful inner resource for insight, transformation, and healing. I really haven't met one person who doesn't need a little more healing in our lives. Whether it's from past experiences or how they're showing up currently. But it really is a lovely sentiment to say, wow, maybe this could help me with that too. And if I make it sound like it's the answer to everything, it isn't. Okay? Now, sometimes you do need to be working with a therapist or working with your primary care physician, but it really is a lovely option for people who are looking for just another way of kind of being in the world. This quote is one of my very favorite quotes here, and it's from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He wrote the book, which I highly recommend, but it's not for the faint of heart. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he says the following: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So stimulus and response, and for some of us, it's like that. They're tightly tied together. And the invitation here is, what if we created space? So moving from being in a reactive place, which is when it's really tight, into giving yourself space to breathe and to be more responsive in how you're choosing to show up. When people right now are talking to me about their triggers, they're like, yeah, but I don't want to be told what to do because of the current situation, and it's really getting me mad. And I say, and I truly will say this, and I might annoy them, and I'm okay with that. Like, let's take a breath. What's really bothering you here? Is it the uncertainty? Is it the volatility of, your nest egg has now gone poof? All sorts of things are showing up here. And yet we might be coming out sideways and saying, oh, it's because someone's telling me that I have to stay 6 feet away from each other. Is that really the core issue, or are there other things going on? So what we want to do is create this space, okay? And I make it sound so easy. I can get triggered like the rest of you. Someone could cut me off at, when I drive, and I could instantly be like saying something in my head like, you jerk, what are you doing? And then I catch myself and I laugh, and I hopefully have enough, and hopefully I do it sooner and sooner, so that I say, not a big deal, we're all okay, let's just drive. One of my favorite little sayings that I share with you, hopefully to make you smile here, is my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. Again, I just want to reiterate, and this is of course from Annie Lamott, I want to reiterate, the mind will go where it wants to go. The thoughts kind of just tend to wander. And so mindfulness training is essentially mind training, okay? There is a reason why it is taught in MBA programs. There is a reason why some preschools are being, they're examining bringing in mindfulness to help kids as young as age 3 learn how to become better socially with other kids and build those connections. Think about it. What if we could have better connections when we're at age 3? What would that mean when that person is age 40? So we are really incorporating this in a lot of areas. And I want to give one other example, is that troops pre-deployment are being taught mindfulness techniques, mindfulness practices, mindfulness exercises, if you would, to help them so that when they are in life and death situations, they can calm themselves, they can calm the mind, and make the best decision possible. So now I'm going to go to the dark side for a few slides here. And it's just to kind of give the foundation. Please keep in mind that that stress is exacerbating a lot of conditions. And I mean, I think I heard from a physician recently, and I think I've actually read this data, is probably about half the time people come into ERs, they are believing they're having a heart attack when it's actually more related to anxiety. And it's nothing to just shake your head and say, oh, well, people are head cases. No, there's a lot of stuff going out here. And the body speaks the mind. The body will relay what's really going on underneath the surface. So if you're having physical symptoms like we showed on a previous slide, take a moment. What is your stress level? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? What's all contributing to this? Because there might be underlying things that are worth looking at. This slide is a little bit perhaps redundant, but I want to break it down into these areas. There's physical, somatic experiences, there's in the mind, there's behaviors, there's emotions. And so paying attention to all of this. I will tell you that pre-COVID even, I will have people as young as age 27 coming to me saying, Tammy, I think I have a problem. I can't concentrate. I go to meetings, I can't think. I can't retrieve information like I used to. Tammy, I think I have early dementia. And I go, okay, I'm trying to tell me more about that. And then when we start unpacking it, what we realize is they are at such a high level of stress and they're not sleeping. And sleep is such an imperative behavior that we really want to make sure people are honoring it. So rather than going into the really catastrophizing what's going on, we say, okay, let's start doing some practices. I might at that moment actually introduce mindfulness to have them understand what's going on in their thoughts. What emotions are they experiencing? How is their body holding those emotions? What behaviors are they leaning into? So it's a really interesting opportunity to kind of use all this information that's available to you, but we don't, because we're so busy doing, day to day and getting our to-do list done and juggling all the balls that, by the way, are really important. Taking care of your children, it matters. Taking care of your livelihood, making sure you're showing up at work and doing quality, contributions, that matters. And sometimes we have to step back and reflect. And so that's what I coach people around is let's step back. How are you navigating your life? And I will tell you, for type A's, this feels like a waste of time. They're like, are you telling me I'm supposed to sit? You're kidding, right? You don't understand, Tammy. You don't know how busy my life is. And yet I do. And I will tell you the return on investment of having space, reflection, introspection, self-compassion it's remarkable. And I tell you, you'll show up as a better leader too.
Hey, Tammy. Tammy, we
Sure.
just had a question come in. How do you discern between a real health issue and a stress-induced response?
Well, I'm not sure I differentiate the two, because those GI issues you might be having might be that you are having them. Okay, they are. So the intertwine between mind and body is so intricate. I can have one thought and I can have, the thing that I'm thinking of is if I think of a lemon, I can start to salivate, and I'm doing it right now. So those two things are so tightly together, so interwoven. And so this is where, of course, I would never say don't consult your doctor. If you are of a concern, I would pick up the phone and call your clinic and talk to them about what you're experiencing, okay? But please don't be upset if they start asking you, what's your stress level? How are you navigating that? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? So it really is about noticing it and then catching yourself saying, I'm not gonna jump to a conclusion yet. I don't know what exactly is going on. So get curious, and a mindfulness will help you to stay curious rather than going instantly to this stress response. Does that make sense, Jackie?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So I think I have heard that sales at like Total Wine are through the roof right now. And then I have a friend who works in the liquor industry, but she says overall sales are not that great because of the restaurant industry is just not selling as much. So I was incredibly happy to hear that but it's still up overall. So when we're out of balance, we lean into some habits that maybe are not in our best interest. And of course, this is pretty self-explanatory. We might be drinking more, spending more, eating more, using drugs, illicit and non-illicit, in ways that maybe they shouldn't be used. So I always invite people to consider this as an option. I will never, I don't often tell people to not do something, to not buy something. I will tell them to make sure it's a mindful intention. I've spoken to a few people who have made some really interesting purchases right now, and I think every financial advisor would say, in COVID right now, definitely take a breath. So they're kind of advocating for mindfully slow things down, call us, let's talk about what the wise thing to do is rather than being impulsive, because people are in a fear state. So there are better options here than some of these things that are going on. So, and of course, I want to throw out to you that, and this is what this whole class is about, is the mindful revolution here. And this was in Time Magazine. Time Magazine about every year or two used to do a cover story on mindfulness. I haven't seen one recently, actually, but it was, and I always love that, because to me, it gave a pop culture type endorsement of something that some people might think is pretty fringy. And I think I want to just tell you that, like I said, MBA programs are bringing this out. I teach it to all of my emerging leaders, all my high potentials. I teach them about the idea of what would it be like if you could actually slow things down and make wiser decisions. And realizing, by the way, that time is sometimes not on people's side. But we want people to be able to have access to this. And this is a great article about, a different way of showing up. So there is research here. So this isn't just Tammy saying, this is a great thing, trust me. There is some really decent research out there. And I just threw a few of these up, and you can always just type in and look on some reputable sites, especially academic journals, about what is really going on. A lot of these come out of mindfulness-based stress reduction work. And again, mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, is an 8-week course in which people are taught different tools. So they're taught how to do a sitting meditation. They're taught how to do yoga. They're taught how to do a walking meditation. They're taught how to even interrupt their thoughts, discerning between what are pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences, and how much does that take up of your mind share. So I'll just run through these. And the things that are highlighted in yellow are really the outcomes. So those are what I really want to pinpoint here. It's decreases in anxiety and binge eating, decreases in perceived stress. And I was working with a client yesterday, and they were making the comment. They said, perceptions are reality. And if I'm perceiving stress, it's really landing with me differently. So, reduction in perceived stress is a critical metric. The immune system, improvements in that is a really big deal. And that was studied at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They did some really interesting tests there. Decreasing depressive symptoms, I've also gone, this last one here, it says meditation training for inmates. I've gone up to the Department of Corrections up in St. Cloud, leading inmates through meditation exercises. So think about this. If you are imprisoned, you have nothing but time on your hands, and your thoughts can really significantly impact what you're experiencing. So for them to become better at navigating that and making sure they're helping guide their thoughts where they want them to go can be really a stress reducer for them. So again, just more of the same here, really. I will tell you that one of the things I think is most interesting is when people are bringing mindfulness practices into younger people. I do recall seeing a study recently that says, anxiety is at epidemic levels with young people. And when I say young people, let's say early college, and I keep thinking, like, gosh, if they would get some of these resources a little younger, would that help them? Would that help them build internal resilience? So again, impacting mood, reducing stress, and really impacting the recurrence of intractable depression. When people have chronic depression, it can be so life-altering. So mindfulness is something that has kind of proven out to be fairly helpful with that. Okay, so those were all studies mostly about mood and some other, self-reports. And I want to just throw this out to you. Mindfulness can actually change your brain. When I was I was probably in high school, and I'm going to confess that this was in the 70s. There was a story that your brain was kind of growing and evolving, but then after age 30, it was all downhill. Sorry, it was looking bleak. And good news is there's research to say the brain is ever changing. It's called neuroplasticity. And, we might have actually, in general, brain matter tends to decrease. But what we're getting is we're just pruning our brain and we're getting better connection. So we're rewiring our brains in positive ways. We used to just think we lose the gray matter, it goes down. Now this study here shows that there's actual research that shows we can increase our gray matter. And the story that one of the elements that contribute to this is in London. If you choose to become a taxi cab driver and become licensed, you have to memorize what's called the knowledge. It's about the 25,000 streets that you have to study for, and you take this exam to pass to get your license. It takes about 2 years of intensive study to actually pass this exam. And so someone at University of London decided, well, I'm curious, is this actually impacting their memory, which is the hippocampus part of the brain? And in fact, what they showed is that people who were able to do that, to learn this information, pass the exam, had larger hippocampus. And they did a control study. So it basically means they grew that area. So go figure. Some of the stories we've told ourselves about this is just the way the brain is, this is just who I am. The invitation is to say, wait a second here. There might be pathways into change that we're not even exploring. So, and one other thing I want to just mention here is on the bottom here, and this goes back to maybe the discussion of why troops are being taught mindfulness pre-deployment. This goes back to the fact that in our brain, when we are being triggered in an emotional state, a stress response, we are operating in our limbic system, the amygdala area, kind of in our reptilian brain, okay? It serves us well at times, but to make great decisions, we don't want to be there. We want to be in our prefrontal cortex. And so one reason when we take breaths, we settle in, we tell our kids to take breaths so they settle down, is we want to be able to shift our ability to access this. We want to take it away from our amygdala and bring it forward into our prefrontal cortex. We want our executive functioning to be playing the major role there. And by the way, just so you know, I'm not anti-emotion. I'm just saying emotions are information. We want you to be able to process it well, and you're going to need access here. So that's what we're hoping for. One other piece I guess I'll give as an example, and I was coaching with an organization throughout the COVID process, and it was really interesting listening to people's reactivity right away when all of the world was shutting down, and how incredibly irritated and frustrated people were with their leaders. They were so mad. They're like, they need to make decisions. They need to do that. They were just so judgmental. There's that word again. And what I noticed is within a couple of weeks, once they had a chance to process and they had a chance to see the world and realize everyone was struggling, leaders of our country, our state, our cities, were all struggling because information was coming in. I saw the arc went from being really highly reactive into being a lot more compassionate and understanding and realizing, you know what, they're doing the best they can. People even say now in a kind way, I don't agree with this. I'm going to follow it because I'm being asked to, but I don't agree with it. But the way they're holding it is very different. And I really give them credit because I think we're seeing in that space between stimulus and response. And initially it was really tight. But as we've all taken a deep breath collectively as a nation and as a world, I think people are seeing it for what it is and realizing I need to stay calm. I need to trust. And that's a hard thing to do in this scary time. So I'm going to walk through these ever so quickly. I know we're running a little short here on time, but here are the benefits. I'm just going to pull them out. Attention regulation. Attention is probably our most important currency. And people say, no, Tammy, it's time. I'm like, no, I've sat in meetings where people are all on their phones. I'm like, why are we wasting people's time when they're multitasking? Attention is really what we're trying to do. And mindfulness can help build attention. It can actually help organizations run more efficient meetings. And I do mean that, setting aside phones and saying we're not going to actually bring computers to our meeting. I know for some that's really radical, but it might actually help have more efficient, more real meetings when people are not in the midst of trying to type while they're doing that. Making wise choices. Again, we want to have access to your prefrontal cortex. We want wise. We want the ability for wisdom to surface. And if we're in a reactionary place, it just doesn't happen that easily. Wow, increased tolerance. Boy, this is a great one right now. And it's, just giving us all space to breathe. Clarity. Again, so there's not going to be a single bad thing here because we're calling them benefits, right? But mental clarity, this goes back to the concentration. And when people really go to, wow, I'm just really struggling, that's a great time to actually pause and reflect and step back. And by the way, if you have a great coach in your organization and you're struggling with some things with concentration, feel free to tap into their wisdom and see if they can coach you through it a little bit. I'm a huge fan of that. Sometimes the best answers come from better questions. Body awareness. I used to work in a health clinic. I worked side by side with a physician, and I'd be talking to someone. They're going to leave my coaching, my health coach, and they were going to go right over to see the doctor. And they said, well, I'm going to talk to her about pain. And I said, well, tell me about your pain. What's it like? And they would say, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? And she would go, well, my knee kind of hurts. And I'm like, is it achy? Is it numb? Is it a sharp pain? I said, the more information you can give your physician, the better they can help you. And so people are not overly aware until something sometimes goes remarkably wrong. So again, asking yourself, what am I really experiencing? Emotional regulation, big time needed right now. Steadiness. Before I went on today, by the way, just to tell you, I did a walking meditation to ground myself before getting on with you today. And truly, that means is I turn on an app that tells me about, walks me through it. So it's guided. And it really talked me through, just put one foot down in front of the other. It grounded me. It really helped. And it made me feel steady coming into this. Because true confessions, my internet went down an hour ago. And that is unsettling when you're doing something like a webinar. And so I felt myself get agitated and get worked up a bit in a stress response. I knew I had to settle myself. So I went to this. I did 4 minutes of a walking meditation, and it helped me to steady myself. And again, back to improve concentration. So a lot of positives here. And I'm going to say one other thing here. Because I used to work as a health coach in an insurance company, when I would ask people, what is one of the top 3 goals you have for your health? They often would say decrease reliance on medication. And so what I want to say is what I like about this approach to life is it's not taking a pill. There is a huge need for medication, so I'm not coming out anti-medication. But what I am saying is this is a really kind of a low risk, high reward, and there's plenty of resources to help you get through that. So, and I'll talk about those in a minute.
Hey, Tammy, you must have triggered, we've had about 3 or 4 new questions just come in, and I'm going to ask them real quickly. Mm-hmm. You had talked about the meeting and centering at the start of a meeting. Is
Yes.
there any way to start a meeting with some sort of centering that doesn't feel so out there? What can you recommend?
Sure. Well, I had to actually do a write-up for a company that asked me that exact thing. And what it was is, let me give a couple examples here. So you can lead with that and you can try to get the whole group centered, okay? You can say something like, let's just take a moment to kind of be present, turn off our electronics if you don't mind, and we're gonna be going into something that's a pretty important topic. So I really need you to be present. So just kind of inviting people into this, reminding them of that. So that's a real gentle, politically correct, that's not even what I wanna say, probably low risk way. I remember hearing of, this other practice of saying that when you go into a meeting room, if you just want to center yourself because you're not in a place where this is discussed, maybe just putting your hands on the back of your chair and taking a deep breath every time you go into a meeting is a way for you to kind of ground yourself and say, okay, I'm going to be present here. I know I've got all these things to do back at my desk, but I'm going to really work on being focused here. So kind of a internal practice of kind of grounding and having that happen.
Great. When you mentioned the app, that triggered some questions. Do you have recommended apps?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I'm going to tell you, we are in an interesting stage right now because with COVID, tons of apps are coming out and giving you free trials. So I will say, I'm going to name a few right now. I know I'll mention a few later, but these may not even be on that list, so I apologize. Headspace is a very, very popular app. Okay, it breaks it down into 10 minutes. It's a guided, it'll walk you through the very basics. Calm is another wonderful app. I use Insight Timer. That's one of my favorites. And of course, usually what they do is usually, they're doing a lot of, like I said, promotions right now, but they also have usually, a free low level one, and then you can spend extra for premium levels. But there's plenty of very good free resources out there. And by the way, anyone can reach out to me just to say that if they're like, I'm not sure where I can find it. In the Twin Cities, we're really blessed with a lot of great resources, but I know people from all around the country, maybe all around the world might be listening. And my guess is mindfulness. I know MBSR has literally been taught on every continent in the world. When I went through my training, there were 155 of us who were probably like 40 countries represented. So it really does permeate out into other areas.
Great. I'm going to ask you one more and then I'll let you move on with your presentation.
Sure.
What's the smallest dosage of mindfulness I can do to get the biggest reward?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the question that comes up quite a bit. And I don't think someone once said that if you're uncomfortable with 10 minutes of mindfulness practice every morning, you probably need 20 minutes. So that's a little tongue in cheek. But I would say if there's any amount that you can put into a drop into your mindfulness bucket, I invite you to do it. And I also invite you to do it without making it a should, without requiring it, like feeling bad. Oh, I didn't do my meditation this morning. What we want to do, and we talk about this quite a bit as a mindfulness teachers, is the goal here is to increase practices that allow you to be mindful. And I was coaching someone this week who was pretty agitated, pretty anxious. And she said, well, I'm making fajitas for dinner. I said, okay, can you do me a favor? And I might say a favor. I probably in coaching wouldn't say a favor. I'd say, I've got homework for you. Can you, when you're cutting your green peppers, can you make it a sensory experience? Can you, when you wash it, can you feel the pepper in your hand using touch? When you cut it, can you smell it? Can you look at how the cells are cutting open? Can you have gratitude for it? Make it a multi-sensory experience and just see what that's like for you. And the goal here isn't to say that's going to be the answer. I mean, that's not the answer to high anxiety. But even for a moment, if someone can let go of anxiety and come into this moment, and even gratitude's a great heart-opening experience. It can be very helpful. And then they can see that there's other pathways into how they're showing up.
Super. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. So William James, great psychologist, commented here, the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. And I think that's at the core of mindfulness, of thought management, if you would. And it's at the core, by the way, of a cognitive therapy, which many people are quite familiar with. I get to choose my thoughts. My thoughts do not get to choose me. And when they do, I get to notice it. And in that moment, make a decision. Do I want to keep with that thought or do I want to redirect it? So this is Sisyphus, from Greek mythology, but this is how some people feel. And I'm going to tell you right now, people are telling me it's Groundhog Day. So this is really, I think, how people are feeling. I truly have to ground myself every morning, like, okay, is this Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? And so life is feeling a little bit like this, like people are not having anything to look forward to. So if this is what you're experiencing, remember that there are options here. Keep calm, breathe deeply, smile, and by the way, all the things I'm talking about here, if you read, like, here are 5 practices of how to deal with COVID, these things are all kind of intertwined. And what I invite you to do, rather than trying to read them all, because in some ways they're redundant, in some ways, we're all just getting these thrown at us, is check in with yourself. What do you really need? Do you need to have a healthy dinner at night? Do you need connection time with your spouse? Do you need time away from your spouse? And how do you ask for that without hurting his or her feelings, or your partner? Ask for what you need, but check in with yourself first, okay? There's so much wisdom in you. And when you are taking a deep breath and kind of going to within, amazing things will be revealed to you. So you get to choose. Do you want the left side of that thought? Mindful, meaning your mind is full of things all the time, constantly. Or do you want the right side of that thought, where you can see that person is seeing as what is before him or her, and just taking it in. So you get to choose. There are so many wonderful options out there. And I am a fan of mindfulness-based stress reduction classes, MBSR. They're offered through a lot of different organizations. Again, it's an 8-week commitment, and it is a big commitment, but it's excellent. I happen to also want to mention is UCLA has a really great, it's called the MARC program, the Mindful Awareness Research Center. They have a lot of free information there. And then there's other apps here that, I mentioned one of them here, Insight Timers here, but again, Calm and Headspace are excellent. There's really some good quality information out there and resources. And then I am a subscriber to Mindful magazine. I actually get a physical magazine every month, and I really do love it, but that organization is amazing. So with that, I think we are wrapping it. Any other questions, Jackie, or anything?
You know what? I know we are close on time. I'm going to ask you one more.
Mm-hmm.
I found mindfulness practices helpful in the past, but I seem to slowly slip away from doing them on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any recommendations for making mindfulness practices habitual?
There's a great book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and it talks about this concept. And one of the core elements is understand what you're getting out of it, and kind of maybe mentally reinforce that a little bit. Like if you have been doing a morning practice, when you end your practice is perhaps giving yourself an acknowledgement of saying, way to go, Ted, I'm glad I took time out for myself today, and kind of reinforcing it, letting it seep in a little bit. Attaching it to another well-ingrained habit is always good practice. Some people are really great about a gratitude journal at night. So perhaps they add on just a couple minutes of, doing some breath work or using a body scan guided meditation. So attaching it. And I think it's a pretty common experience, by the way, is to kind of be moving in and out of using this tool. The good news is if it's in your toolbox, and let's say you've allowed it for whatever reason, it became less necessary in your mind, and it's gotten a little rusty, and now we're talking, and you're like, you know what, I want to bring it back. I would just, stay curious with yourself, bring it back, do some practices, maybe commit to a week of doing those practices, and see if you can understand how you can better integrate it into your day in a way that is more likely that you're going to be successful. So do some introspection too.
Fabulous. Well, with that, I want to thank you, Tammy. That was perfect. It was just what the doctor ordered. And it's a great way to end our May series and look forward to the June series. As promised, the recording will be sent out early next week, and you'll have access to those resources that Tammy listed as well. We hope you enjoyed today's session. And just so you know, we flipped all of our courses to be virtual. So if you haven't visited the Executive Education website to see what types of courses might help with your professional development, you might want to look at that. And also, our next online learning series is next Wednesday, June 3rd, with Michelle Vig, who will be talking about decluttering your home office, your calendar, and your mind. The official title of the session is A Holistic Look at Clutter. We promise you another great session to kick off June. Thank you. Be well, and I hope to see you next week.